Good afternoon. Speaking of spirits, we are recording today to talk about a really interesting topic. I'm here with Gina and Susie. This is Colleen, and we're talking about uh, death doulas, or I'm sure there's other names for it. But um, Gina, can you describe what that is?
Well, what I do is I assist people that are terminal when they're ready to cross, whether they're conscious or unconscious. Um, I have found a lot of times, especially like if people are comatose, that I actually communicate with them the same that I do someone who's crossed. So, for me, it's just working with the family, helping them to understand the process, not being afraid of, like they call it the death rattle, the way the breathing changes and different kinds of physiological things that occur at the time of death.
And Susie, you've helped a lot of people kind of get prepare for crossing and crossing. So what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very similar to Gina. I helped my own mother when it was her time, because I felt her timeline was up, that it was time to go. And we had to kind of sit down and talk with her and give her almost like, I don't know, like a blessing of release to let her know that everything was going to be okay and it is okay to let go and travel on. She had been slipping in and out of her body for quite a few hours before she finally let go. She had been traveling and meeting and talking to other relatives that lived, cities away, just checking in on them. And I got the reports of that later, that they had come to visit her. But she was so concerned with holding on for my father and worried about um, how he would fare after she was gone, that we actually had to ask her to let go.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah, and I've only had experiences with my parents and our friend, um, and and I wasn't there when our friend passed, but uh, I I knew that because Gina and I had gone over there the night before she passed, and like, ooh, she's leaving. You could feel her
mhm,
slipping away,
yeah.
and I mean, her body had just had she'd had it. She was tired. Um, but so what? Where does the term doula come from? Do you know?
Um, Doula is like a midwife type assistant kind of a thing, and there's birthing doulas and there's death doulas, so they are just there to help you walk through that process, whether it's the person dying or the family or both.
Okay. Um, so this is nothing. This is not something new. I had just
No.
I no. I had watched a program on. It was an interview with a woman who termed herself the death doula, and she works in the Portland area. And so she comes in and she's with someone as long as it takes. So, and a lot of times it looks like these people are alone. And so they don't have family around them or no family left. And she comes in and just helps them prepare
Hmm.
to cross, to pass, I should say. Um, it's so, yeah, no, this has probably gone on for what, centuries, but,
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, I just, it seemed like a new term to me. So I thought, well, this is interesting. Let's talk about it. I think, if somebody's in hospice, you get the little pamphlet because my dad passed to 2020, and so he was in hospice care, and you get this pamphlet, and they tell you what to expect. But they gave me the pamphlet, and 2 days later, he was gone. So none of that stuff happened. He was ready to go
Yeah.
at that point. He was ready to go. But
Hmm.
um in your experience when someone is crossing, and this goes out to both of you, did they do the people actually start communicating with people that have passed before them?
Yes.
I have found it varies a little bit, but my parents passed away 19 and 18 and a half years ago. And my dad passed the end of December of 2005 and my mom July of 2006. And she was furious that he left before her because she'd been sicker longer.
Oh,
And so the week leading up to her passing, she was adamant that my dad was coming to take her on a date and that she needed to get her hair done and she needed to get her nails done. My mother was very, I call it vain. Other people call it particular how you look. I did not inherit that. So we had her hair colored and she had a stylist that came in and trimmed it and fixed it for her and did a manicure for her. And she had been talking about hearing angels. She could hear them playing music. She was talking
Mm-hmm.
about people visiting her. And she apparently did not want us to be there when she crossed. Me and the kids were heading there at noon, and she
Mm-hmm.
passed at about 10 till.
You
So
know,
Dad came and
I
got her for
hear
the day.
that's a very common thing, Gina, is they
Yeah,
don't want some of us in there when they actually do pass. Like you're planning on being there the whole time, and then all of a sudden maybe you've got to use the restroom, so you step out for like 2 minutes and you come back and they're gone.
yeah, yeah.
why do you
And
think
then
that is? Because they don't want to hurt you? They don't
I
want.
don't know. We were all in the room when my dad died, and my mom had Parkinson's. So it physically and mentally affects you. And it was kind of strange when he died. My mom was like, Donald Havlicek has left this world. He has moved on, and she was kind of like doing a monologue of some sort about it. But he had a little different experience. He had been taken out of their home. They were on hospice. He was in the home because of my mother's Parkinson's. She hallucinated and had I don't know, terrible visions. She saw very scary things and she had thought my dad was trying to commit suicide and he was bedridden. He couldn't even get out of his bed to do that. So they took him to like it's where people go like after surgeries to recover so they don't have to be in the
Hmm.
hospital, or people that are dying that aren't in a nursing home can go. And he was there just over 24 hours before he passed. And the night before, um, this is one of the crazy theories with hospice. A lot of people say, oh, they kill the person. They give them so much morphine that they kill the person. And that isn't true. My
Mm-hmm.
belief is that the morphine helps the person to not be in pain, to be able to relax, and it's easier for them to let go than being struggling with trying to stay alive. And so the last time we were able to talk to my dad was the night before, and he was very scared and told me, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm really scared. And I said, you're going to be fine. There's going to be a lot of people that will come to help you. And it was super cold. They actually had brought heaters in. It was December 30th. They brought heaters into his room trying to warm it up in there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was just packed full of people that were there to
Right,
greet my dad. So
right.
it
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't know. I
When my niece,
feel different.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
When my niece passed away, in the few days just before she left, she would stop and open her eyes every now and then and say, "Oh, Grandma," which is my mom who passed away just before, a few years before. And she would say, "Grandma's here," and then, "No, no, don't go, don't leave me," and then back into, her sleep, and things like that would continue to happen. Like she would be talking to somebody that wasn't there up in the corner, but a lot of the time she would speak to my mom before she passed.
Yeah, my dad, he was cognizant until I think it was 48 hours before he passed. I had taken him to the hospital, and he did not want to die in the hospital, and he didn't. He ended up dying here. with me, but I had to take him to the hospital for something, and the doctors were really kind, and they said, well, your dad is pretty close to pass. And I said, I know, but I couldn't get what was going on with him under control enough to keep him comfortable. And so
Mhm.
they were trying to help me with that. And my dad checked out like that. And I remember I remember him, and it's funny because it's my dad and he was a comedian, but I remember him in the hospital room, and he was looking around and he was talking and laughing until he cried, just laughing until he cried. He's like, he'd look at me and he goes, that was the funniest thing I ever heard. I'm like, I didn't hear it, but I'm like, yeah, Dad, that was really hilarious. I'm not going to argue with him, you know?
Mhm.
I'm not going to argue with him. I said, Dad, that was so funny. That was so funny. And so we ended up bringing him home the next day, and then he died the following, well, about two, oh gosh, what time? Anyway, it was quick. It was within 24 hours because
That's
hospice
good.
came in. They said, okay, your dad is here. So here's the pamphlet. This is what to expect. None of that happened. Like
Mhm.
none of it. But I could feel, so this was before my remodel, before I had central heat, before I had insulation. But so this house was already cold, but it was really, really cold. And I had someone here. He was sitting with me because he knew that my dad was going to pass pretty quickly. And so he came up, and the man that did, I remember kind of looking at him because, like you guys, he's more of a medium than I am, and I don't really see. I just happen to hear, and sometimes I see. But I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and I had all the dogs. It was when I had that little tiny living room, and I remember the dogs getting up and leaving the room and going in the kitchen because it was so crowded, and it was all of the people coming in through the front door. You could see them, and it was
Mhm.
one of the first times that I saw everything that I saw. I mean, it was like there was guys with World War II flight suits, there were uniforms, there were people I knew, people I didn't know, mostly men, but some women. But it wasn't until um, my stepmother walked through the door, and she walked through the door and she stood at the foot of his bed because his bed at that point, we'd put him in the living room so I could just be right there with him and sleep on the couch right with him because I thought it was going to take a few weeks. I didn't know. And my friend said, get over there and hold his hand because it's going to happen right now.
Mhm.
And I held his hand and I talked to him, and I looked at my stepmom, who had passed a couple of years before my dad, and she was smiling from ear to ear like, what took you so long, O'Hara? It was so cool. And then like that, he took his last breath and he was gone. And then
Mhm.
they all filtered out very quietly, like they and that's the one thing that I've shared the story with people, and I like, do not be afraid of death, because all of the people who have gone before you who love you are there
Mhm.
now. And you, of course, you probably have all told me this, but it wasn't until that experience that I went, oh wow, that's really, really true. It's really
Mhm.
true. So I just, if I can comfort one person, to let them know, you don't take that journey alone,
No.
Yeah.
where, wherever we go.
Yeah. This
And
year
it's
has
so much
been,
a celebration.
yeah. This year's been a really crazy year. I've had over 20 people that I'm either related to or that are my friends or the parents of my friends or the children of my friends that have passed this year.
20.
And over 20, 21. Two of them passed
I'm
the
having a
day.
hard time hearing you, Gina, just so you
Two of
know.
them
um
passed the
wow.
day before Thanksgiving, so it's like 21 people now. But
Wow.
Wow.
two of them were really good friends. And the one guy, the hospice had tried to come and tried to get his wife to put him on hospice, and she wasn't going to do it. He wasn't going to die. He had cancer. And I sat and I talked with her, and she goes, they kill them, they give them drugs, and they this. And I said, no, they just make them more comfortable so that they're more at peace and they can be relaxed. But she
Right.
wouldn't do it that day. The next day, she did. She let them come. She let them bring the bed, and he actually passed that night. But the night before, I had been sitting there talking with him. He and I had worked together for quite a few years, and I said, he goes, I don't know. I'm afraid. And I said, there's nothing to be afraid of. I said, your friends and your family are going to be coming. You will not be alone. They'll be right here with you. And he goes, I've seen some of them. And I said, that's good. I said, then you know that they're here. And I was telling him, and don't be surprised if your big dog, I'm not going to say names of, I'm like, don't be surprised if your big dog shows up too. And he'll come. And I said, you used to go buy him cheeseburgers at McDonald's. Of course he's going to come and be here with you. And it's just, he wasn't scared. It's one of my gifts to know when a crossing is coming. Usually I feel it within 3 days to a week. And I knew his time was near. I wasn't sure it was the next day. The same with Lynn that you were talking about. You and I both were like, she will not be here in August. It's right here. It's right now. But the other person had been on life support and was on life support for about 10 days. And she was out of her body. She was like, I'm not laying in that damn bed. I don't have to be sick anymore. And I had the visual of orbs and her just being out. She had a little more of what you read on the paper. She had some secretion from her nose and mouth toward the end, was struggling with breathing and the raspiness of the breathing, but she'd been on life support, and it took a few hours after the life support was turned off.
She was on life support for 10 days. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
She went in, he took her in on a Wednesday, and they removed her the following Friday, not 3 days
That's
later.
right. That's right. Gosh.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this concept, I mean, if you've helped people cross, anybody who's listening to this, if they've done that, I guess it's a blessing, because people need that assurance when they're crossing, when they're dying, right? They need that assurance. But I can imagine if you weren't somebody who could to let it go, let that, because it's painful for the person left behind, right? And you're not, maybe not family, but it's still painful to watch somebody cross. You got to learn to let that go. But what a blessing it is to be able to do that.
Yeah, and in that last situation, it's like
there's a
lagging or
delay.
something, but
Yeah.
Lizzie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's a beauty in being like the death doula and people that like Gina, you and me, that understand when it's coming, and to be able to talk them through that, because then they have someone on both sides of the veil. They have us with their physical experience there, staying with them, and then they literally, it's not like a cold handoff, it's a warm handoff to their family, their friends, and their loved ones on the other side. So if you picture it, it's not really they're all alone or they got to step out into the dark. In that room, you've got live people, you've got people with their physical body, and you have the people without their physical body, all there for them for that transition. So they're really not alone. And it is a beautiful thing. It's just, there, of course, we're going to be sad, and that is part of showing our respect. And that's showing how much we actually loved and cared for that person, because that's, hand in hand, loving and sadness, it goes together.
Right. Gina, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, even with all of that, with the discharge and the change in breathing, I had to tell the other two people, the living people that were there, she's crossing. You need to come over here. It's like crossing right now. And they couldn't notice, but I can feel that energy shift. But she absolutely was not in her body. It was just her physical body dying. But I think the reason she'd been on life support for a while was her family kept holding out hope that she would recover. But from
Mm-hmm.
the time she went in the hospital, I knew it was just a matter of time. And it was the machines, which that's okay. That the keeping somebody on life support is for us. It isn't necessarily for them. And there are miraculous recoveries, you know, but it doesn't have to be a scary thing. It is a sad thing. It is a difficult thing, but it's also a beautiful thing, especially when people have been sick. If they've had cancer, or like with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
my dad had a lung disease and my mom had Parkinson's, and to know they don't have to have that pain or that sickness or their lack of being able to do the things that they had always done.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, there was two things I was going to mention to you, ladies, that I've experienced throughout a lot of my time dealing with this, not only in my personal experience with having like near-death experiences, but with passing of loved ones. Um, I've often felt death literally as an entity step into the room. So I can feel their physical change, their spiritual change of them letting go that energy, but I also feel death, the energy step in to collect. And it is not always, scary. I'm sure to some of them it has been scary. But because I have felt him in my own personal life myself. And then the other experience that I've had quite often is my last ex that I had, I literally met his dad right after he died. His body was laying there in the bed in the hospital, but his soul was still there and I could feel it. And I met him. Does that make sense? And
Wow.
then there's many other times where I've attended funerals and I can feel the soul of the person there attending the funeral and observing the people. And every now and then, when you look in the casket, I could see like an overlay of their spirit, not in their body, just an overlay of their spirit. And they're like a smile, just like real fast, seconds worth, just a smile or a little eye twitch, but they're there. And I like that they're there to see, who shows who's there for the respects and stuff, because I don't think it's like a one and done, you're gone immediately, like boom, you're gone. I think there's still a little bit of a transition period of, okay, yes, I have passed away, here is my body, here is my family members that I need to now comfort and support in that part of the grieving process, and then I can step back and fully be gone until they need me again. Does that make any sense to you guys? Does that resonate with you guys at all?
oh yeah, I feel a lot of times the deceased person at their funeral service or at the viewing kind of wake or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it. I had a very interesting, the first time I saw the soul of a dead person look like I'm looking at the two of you that I knew about.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I saw many more before that, but had never really distinguished this isn't a live human person, this is a soul. So it was a strange thing. It was the daughter of one of my professors from Idaho State University, and they had lived here and had moved to Texas for about a year or two, and she was 16, and she and her boyfriend and I think another friend had gotten in a car wreck, and she was the only one who passed. And so they did the funeral in Texas, but then they wanted to do a memorial here because she had so many friends she'd gone to school with her whole life. So I went to help her aunt, who was a good friend of mine, to set up for the celebration of life. And we both felt her there. It was at one of the Catholic churches here in town, and they had this little piece of wood that was suspended, kind of almost like a canopy or a platformy thing with chains to the ceiling, but it was the suspended thing above the altar. And I could feel her just sitting up there, just watching us, seeing what we were doing. So as we went to leave, I had this weird sensation and I turned around to look. And there was about a 10, 11-year-old little girl in a leotard and the stockings and the not the tutu, but the little chiffon skirt and the toe shoes. And she was sitting on the roof of the church. And I was like, that is dangerous, you know? And I turned around and I'm thinking, no, I got to say something. What in the world's going on? And I turned back around and she wasn't there. And she'd been she had her head like kind of resting on her hand, and she had one knee up and one leg out. When I looked at her, and I'm like, okay, that was really weird, because this was a child. This was like a 10, 11-year-old child. And the person that we were doing the celebration of life for was like 16. So I did this whole talking to myself in the mirror the whole way home. What did I see? Could that have been Casey? Oh my gosh, am I losing my mind? Have I gone over the edge? And I'm like, I need a sign. I need a sign. You need to tell me, what was happening. And I couldn't even go back that night for the celebration of life. I was just so, I don't even know what the word, frazzled about it. So the next day I go to help her clean up, and we meet in the parking lot, and I lost it. I started babbling like an idiot, and I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, come here just a second. I need to get something out of my car. And she opens her trunk, and sitting in her trunk was a leotard, the little chiffon skirt, and a pair of toe shoes sitting in a box. And it was what that little girl had on. And I just started bawling, and I was like rambling like a lunatic. She's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm like, is this Casey's? Is this Casey's? And she's like, yes, why? And I said, because I saw a little girl wearing this on the roof. And she goes, a little girl? And I said, yeah, she was like 10 or 11 years old. And she had this on, and she was sitting on the roof posed. And she opens her wallet and pulls out a photo of Casey, 11 years old, posed exactly like that, in those exact clothes. And we both just started bawling. And she goes, I knew she was here.
Wow.
I knew she was here. And it was the first time, like I said, I know that what I saw was not a living person. I'm sure I've seen many that I didn't realize at that moment, but this is my life ever since as long as I can remember. And it was so overwhelming. But yeah, she wanted 100% validation that she was there for her friends and her family. So
What a wonderful affirmation for both of you. Yeah, that's amazing. My aunt, because I don't know, it's an interesting custom. I don't know how you guys feel about taking pictures at funerals, but my family has always done that. And my grandfather passed when I was just a baby, but I had an aunt who took pictures of the family and my grandfather in the casket. And right next to the casket, there was a door, to go out, and the flowers, and just barely behind the door was a shadow that you could pick out features and clothing of my grandfather standing there,
oh, wow.
watching everyone else.
The first time anybody asked me to take pictures, it was a video. It was in Texas, and so it was a big video camera. She goes, I can't make it to my grandmother's funeral. Will you please videotape it? And I'm like, how morbid. I thought it was so morbid. Go up to the casket, videotape grandma, but I guess it's kind of a thing. People do it.
There are a lot of people. My family wasn't so much into doing that, but a lot. I just went to my friend's mother's funeral in September, and they all, each one of her children and their spouse and their children, stood by the casket and took pictures. And
it's not Disneyland, folks, but
I know.
it's weird.
I've heard both sides of the fence. Some say it's disrespectful and they don't want it. Others say, yes, please. It's just really interesting, just back again to their beliefs of, the dead. But then you've got the Victorians who, that's what they would do, is prop up their dead. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that would be the only picture they usually took, though. It's not like they had us posting screenshots and selfies all the time.
Yeah.
So
they'd be shocked with now, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really on the fence about that. I guess, if you took a picture of me, well, first of all, I'm going to be ashes, but I'm not. They're not there. They're not there in their body. So I guess maybe they're. I don't know. It's just weird to me. It's like Weekend at Bernie's, kind of stuff.
Prop them up.
prop them up and take them water skiing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and
But
like they put makeup on them and the whole bit made them look
Mhm.
as, pretty or living as
right.
possible. But we do that with
Yeah.
the morticians when they do their makeup and
Mhm.
their hair and make them look alive, more like they used to
You
look.
know, now that I've done a lot of research on death practices and things like that, I don't want to be embalmed and, buried in the ground with all those toxic chemicals leaching out. That just, I don't know.
Mm-mm.
That does not sound appealing to me, but to
No.
each their own.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I think this was a really interesting topic. If you could give a piece of advice to a listener who maybe has the abilities that you have, but hasn't done this in particular, would you recommend that they do this, like with their family members or friends? I mean, what would your guidance be?
Do you want to go
Well,
first? Or you
Gina?
want me?
sure. Um, I think it would be good if they were connected with somebody like me and Gina to be able to, like, have a firsthand experience with it before they have to do it on their own, because
Mm,
it might be a little bit scary for them, especially if they are not really solid in their beliefs or, their practices or thoughts about the afterlife and things like that. So you'd really have to counsel them, see where they stand, and kind of work with them on how to do that. But I think most of us start off like me and Gina, kind of like instinctually, you know, and then we just kind of learn as we go too. What do you think, Gina?
Well, a couple different things. I think one of the most important things that I help people with is making sure they take that opportunity to say all the things that they need to say to whoever they love, because there's so many
Mm-hmm.
people with so many regrets. With that being said, they can hear us. We can talk to
Yeah.
them anytime, even after they've crossed. So if you
Mm-hmm.
didn't get to say goodbye, if you didn't get to, apologize or say I love you or whatever, do it now. They hear you. It's not like it's a once and done. The second thing is, as I said, it was one of my gifts. I would get a dream. I would get a premonition. I can't describe how I see it, but I see death around them. Not death, the entity. I just,
Mm-hmm.
something is different about the aura or something that I feel. And
It's like an
I,
energy shift, huh?
yeah, and I was really upset because I was told about my uncle, I was told about my grandfather, I was told about my grandmother, and I'm like, I don't want to know this. I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Surprise me with everyone else. And I used to read for California Psychics, and we were in a chat room, and I was, saying that this was a gift that I hated, and a lady said, "Why are you so selfish?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And she goes, "The gift isn't for you to know. The gift is for you to help the other people to maybe make that final contact." And I said, "Oh, what? Am I going to call up and go, oh, by the way, your mom's going to die?" No, you don't do that. You call your friend and say, "So, how are you? When's the last time you talked to your mom? How's she doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And just say, it's really important when our parents are older or our parents are ill or our friends are ill that we take that opportunity so that they know we love them, we care for them, it's okay for them to go. You don't need to say, oh, time is ticking, but giving them, or have you, made your final plans, because we just never know what's going to happen. And so it's really important to have the, deaths or the life insurance made sure you've got the beneficiaries correct, and just having all that, because it gives you peace of mind and it gives your family peace of mind. So that would be my thing. I don't hate it as much. I don't love it, but it has a
Mm-hmm.
purpose. And like I said, it kind of shocked me being told I was selfish. And she goes, you have an ability to know this, and you can closure to people that may not have had it otherwise, or give that person who's going to cross their opportunity to tie loose ends up or to have everything ready.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, Gina. And there's also some interesting times that we've been through, like, about my daughter. She's like me, and she saw my father pass in a vision 3 days before he left. So Katie had a vision that my dad passed 3 days before he died, and she still struggles with that information. Now, on one hand, I think that was for her to be prepared, for her
Mhm.
own well-being, to know that that was coming, even though she still carries the guilt of saying, oh, well, no, that there's no way that was going to happen, that, there's no way. And so she carries a guilt of not being able to warn my father that, the car was going to fall on him. So she carries that guilt that she didn't believe that intuition, and that really bothers her to this day. Now, Katie and I will still go to, like, let's say Walmart, and we can see on people just randomly walking around that they're really ill, and we can tell you roughly about how long they have. And what do we do with that? They're absolute complete strangers, just walked right past us. Do we come up and tap them on the shoulder and say, sir, you have congestive heart failure, you've got about 6 months left?
No.
I don't know if
No,
that's
but I do
why.
know that if either of you tell me to get my wills prepared, I'm screwed. I'm just saying.
Right, right.
Let Katie know that it's a little different and exactly the same. So when my grandmother died, I was 17. I was a senior in high school. I had been going through a horrible depression. It was the first time that this situation went almost too far. And my parents left for the first time ever. I was 17 years old to go on a trip and leave me home alone. And then on the weekend, I was supposed to go stay with my brother. But on Monday, I had to come back because I had a counseling appointment. So the counselor's office was on the ISU campus. Just up the hill, my grandparents lived on 11th, literally an eighth of a mile. I always went to see them. But that Friday night when I stayed at my brother's, I dreamt I came home from school. I opened the garage door to go into the house, and there was a man in there putting up they're not ladders, but they're the platforms that you put all the plants on at funerals. They're like the brass stair-stepped ladder-like
Yeah,
things.
like
And
the little
he's sitting in
easels.
there, and my garage is filled with flowers. And I said, what's going on? And he goes, oh, your grandma died. And I said, oh. And I walked into the house. Well, that was Friday night or Saturday night. I don't remember. My appointment was Monday. And I had told my friends, because I didn't want them to know I was seeing a counselor. By the way, for anyone who ever feels suicidal, there is help and you should go get it. I'm still here 40 some years later. So, but I had my counseling appointment, and I had told my friends I'm going up to visit my grandma and grandpa, not I'm going to a counselor. And I got done and I was really hungry, and I thought I'm going to go grab something to eat really quick, and then I'll drive over and say hi to them. And I got in the car and I got some food, and I was tired and I had homework, and the dream was in the back of my mind. And I thought, if I don't go say goodbye, she's not going to die. And she died the next morning. So that was one of my things. So I understand and can relate completely with Katie, but it was their time. We couldn't have changed it.
Right.
I would have loved to have had that opportunity to say goodbye, but I learned a really hard lesson.
Yeah.
And it's not, most of the time we don't receive that information because we're supposed to stop it. An accident, like if we have a premonition of an accident, wear your seatbelt, take a different road, don't speed, be really careful.
Right.
It's going to be ice, kind of a thing. But it is what it is. And I truly believe we all have a time. And it's a mistake you only want to make once. And maybe she kind of also feels she didn't say goodbye, or she didn't take advantage of that. but it's like nobody gives you an instruction book on your premonitions. And
No.
I feel like we get them for three reasons. We get them to prepare us for something difficult coming. We get it
Hmm.
to be able to cope better with that, or we get it to maybe make it less. Like I said, if you dream about a car wreck, be sure to wear your seatbelt. Don't go across that bridge. It's really icy this time of year. You know, those kind of things to diminish the impact it could have. Because not
Hmm.
Yeah.
everything is their death, but it could be our paralyzed from the neck down, or, you know, losing a limb or something like that. So, but
Yeah. Well, and I've tried to explain to her that it was his time because at the same, maybe not the same exact day, but around the same time, because he passed like um 3 days after his birthday. He turned like 71, and then he had went to I think it was Hot August Nights, and he had brought back two really pretty necklaces for me and my younger sister. And he said, here, he gave them to me. He says, choose which one you want. And I was like, well, I want this one on the left, but I know she's going to throw a fit if she doesn't get that one. You know what I mean? I'm like, but I really want it. And then something told me, don't fight over it because it's not worth it and it
yeah,
will upset
Mm.
your dad. And it was about my father. It was more about the gift that my father was giving. And I was told you'll regret it. And so I just gave that up to her and kept the other one. And that is one of my most cherished pieces because he gave it to me. You know what I mean? And there was no contention surrounding that. And then he was gone.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Susie, I know that you've got to run, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this because I think it's a really important topic. And yeah, if you're watching the video, and you want to reach out to us, please do. If you want to get in touch with either of these ladies, I can forward your information on to them. If you need help, like in a mentoring situation, like what do I do? This is what my gift is. But yeah, I think it's a remarkable thing that you guys do. And thank God for people like you because it keeps it helps. Thank you for everything that you guys do in this spiritual journey that we're all on.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Yep.
Yeah.